So on that note, we've got a couple of other amazing personal training movement specialists here. We've got Tiana, we've got Kathy Donato, who's one of the top trainers over at Animal Flow. She's a master trainer there. We've got Kika Mila, who's a master trainer over at Muscle Activation Techniques. And then we've got Melanie, who's the head trainer over at one of the top obstacle course training centers here in Southern California. So we've got amazing fitness people in here. And I know Kika had a question. Kika, did you want to jump on? Or?
Hi there. It was just in regards to discussing the knee. I really enjoyed talk about the hip as being a component of the knee. I love that. You talked about hip flexion, hip extension, hip abduction, adduction. In order for the stretching component, do you do rotational stuff as well, or is it only in those two planes?
It's a great question. I love the technical questions. So yes, the rotational component I did not mention, and the reason I did not mention that is because it's the most sophisticated vector, and it's really built on top of the other two. So I think of adduction, abduction as the base, flexion and extension as the oppositional vector that comes in to create a quadrant, and then the rotational vector gives the depth, and it gives the movement that gets deeper into the joint in particular. And all three vectors are very important, but the rotational vector is the most sensitive to having the correct amount of force, the correct amount of range, and so on and so forth. So typically when I'm working with someone, I'll start by doing assisted stretching just on their hip girdle. So they'll push out with both knees, bring both knees together, pushing out with both knees, bring both knees together. Adductors, squeezing with both knees, bringing them out, squeezing in, bringing them out. And then after that, I'll be like, okay, what's going on in the hip, flexion, extension, okay. And then it's about moving all three vectors together. And that's when it gets really sophisticated, which is why I could use, 4 or 5 people assisting me when I stretch, because the adduction, abduction, and flexion, extension vectors typically have a lot of force. And even the rotational vector can have a lot of force. So I could have 2 people on each of those vectors. And then it's a matter of timing. When do we need more adduction? When do we need more flexion? Oh, we need more rotation. And then as you do that, we're starting to find very specific pockets of scar tissue and dense fascia that you otherwise would not find by just doing adduction, abduction, flexion, extension movements. So to train someone to actually feel through all three vectors and target the timing and the number of reps and the speed and the duration and the angle and all that stuff takes a few years of dedicated practice, internship based work, working with a variety of conditions from physical like knee problems to Parkinson's to all sorts of other things. And then you'll start to see more patterns in terms of what each problem is associated with. In terms of the knee, there's usually a torque happening at the knee, which is a very rotational based phenomenon. And ultimately, though, if you tried to go in and do the rotational, it would put a lot more torque on the knee because if there's knee problem in particular, there's scar tissue going on. And scar tissue is interesting because fascial tissue by design already has more force than the muscles, but the scar tissue is like a foreign object inside the body, and it has tremendous amount of force. I mean, it's just unfathomable. And you would think that like I could be working with like a 10-year-old or 12-year-old professional gymnast, female, and she could have so much scar tissue from certain things that it takes several strong people to lift, a young person's leg up if they've been professionally training in a way that's caused problems. And so with scar tissue, it takes finesse because it has so much force that it doesn't just exceed you have to exceed the tensile strength of the scar tissue, but that could exceed the capacity of the joint structure. And so normally when I'm stretching someone, I'm looking for the path of greatest resistance. And then it's like, this is where it's at. It's right on it. Yeah, but if you hit scar tissue, you're getting the path of resistance, which isn't just from the scar tissue, but from the joint itself. There's too much compression in the joint. And so then it's like, we found the scar tissue. Yes, we need to work on that, but we've got to find another way in because the joint can only handle so much. And so usually that means going back to the simple adduction, abduction movements, allowing those vectors to be more stable, and then the joint becomes less compressed. Then you go back in with the rotation and then going, back and forth like that. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.